Welcome to the Global Gratitude Summit. I'm Luann Saraga-Walters.
And I'm Sharon Saraga-Walters.
Thank you for joining us again today. Today, we're actually looking at multiculturalism and diversity and how gratitude can impact our understanding and appreciation for both of those. Dr. Vagdevi Meunier is a clinical assistant professor at the University of Texas in Austin, an adjunct professor at St. Edward's University, and a licensed psychologist with a private practice where she specializes in couples and family therapy. She has extensive experience with multicultural psychology and cross-cultural research on relationships. She's also a certified Gottman couples therapist and master trainer in the Gottman method. Dr. Meunier incorporates mindfulness, neurobiology, and positive psychology into her work, and joins us to talk about how we can approach healthy multicultural relationships in today's environment. Welcome, Dr. Meunier. So we're so honored to have you today in such an important and pertinent conversation.
Thank you, Luann. I'm happy to be here.
You know, we've got a full tablet of questions that we want to ask you. And your focus on, I love that you have that focus on neurobiology as well as positive psychology and mindfulness and bringing in gratitude around that. I think sometimes we don't actually think about our role in those things, but we need it so much today. And as an example, we're seeing diversity in marriage more and more as an example with multicultural people marrying in cross cultures and how cool that is. But I know that there can be some challenges in that. So how do successful interracial, intercultural relationships emerge?
So I want to start with the idea that diversity is a good thing. And that nature is actually built around the idea of diversity. So you have a diversity in a forest, you have a diversity of species, and there's something about that diversity that helps nature and our universe function, right? And I think what we have done as human beings, and I should say some cultures, have really embraced the idea. So when you think about indigenous cultures around the world, they embrace the idea of diversity and they really live as one with nature. But I would say in Western culture, we have really created some silos. And so the first principle, if you will, of diversity is we were meant to be diverse. Diversity is good. It's beneficial to society, to relationships, to communities. We're elevated and strengthened by it and not diminished by it. That when we can engage in intercultural, interracial relationships, we become the better for it, and so does the other person. And
so
I have a
go ahead.
I have a quote here from the Dalai Lama. And he's one of my favorite people in the world. And this is the quote. He says, "In today's interconnected and globalized world, it's now commonplace for people of different worldviews, faiths, and races to live side by side. It's a matter of great urgency, therefore, that we find ways to cooperate with one another in a spirit of mutual acceptance and respect." And I think that is the principle. It's both critical and urgent and necessary. And when we do it, we are made the better for it.
I love that. Mm-hmm. You know, you mentioned that we tend to drift off into these silos, and then the Dalai Lama bringing that back together and saying, let's abandon these silos. Let's really look at how we can still be within our culture. And I want to not say abandon silos. I want to say expand silos, because we can still be within that. I think that's important, but also understanding others. Why do we create those silos in the first place?
I think human beings like to categorize, and we tend to fear and judge what we don't know.
Huh.
And when something feels really different, one of the analogies that I like to use is we all grow up under a coconut shell. And it feels good. You know, I'm from India, and so coconuts are everywhere. So growing up under a coconut shell sort of captures that metaphor for, I think it's my universe, but I don't know that I'm living in a coconut shell. And it feels safe and comfortable and familiar. And so when I come outside the coconut shell, I have to actually deal with the anxiety and the fear that what I know is not accurate or real or truth, that there might be other truths, that what I believe in might be judged and seen as not good enough by somebody else. And so I think we create these silos as a way of creating safety, comfort. But one of the hallmarks of intercultural relationships, or one of the necessary components of intercultural relationships, is the ability to tolerate anxiety and not work to reduce anxiety.
That's an important point. And I want to just address something that sometimes happens in the recording of these. We're using an internet, obviously differing bandwidths to communicate. And sometimes we have a little freezing up. So if you're an attendee and you're watching, just keep hanging in there. The audio seems to continue forward. And then after about 10 seconds, the audio and the video sync again. So I want to address that right off the bat, because I noticed a little bit of a glitch with that earlier. Dr. Meunier, with intercultural marriages and intercultural relationships, we get to the point of maybe stepping outside of that fear, or like you said, learning how to tolerate that anxiety, because we fall in love with somebody, but then we still have those differences. So in your work, what do you see then that helps strengthen the marriages, or what are some of the, I don't want to say problems, because you just talked about not looking. Walk me through how you talk with, as a family therapist, with that.
Right. So, I'm trained in the Gottman method. And so I want to get to something that I wrote up about what Gottman found, right? Is that trust is a very important thing. And trust is something that allows us to handle the complexity of life. That when we're in an intimate relationship, over time, complexity increases. So trust allows us to handle the complexity and be more resilient and not fall apart. Well, guess what? When you're in an intercultural relationship, trust is not something you can assume, because we all internalize the kinds of messages and the cultural values, and particularly the prejudice or the negative stereotypes we've heard about other people. And so on one level, just speaking from my own personal experience, right? I met my husband, he's Caucasian American, and I loved him because he was so different. I loved being with him because he saw the world with such a different lens. And he loved being with me for that same reason. But you can't get away from the fact that both of us have internalized, stigmatized values and opinions about other people. So when we begin to work in an intimate relationship or get into an intimate relationship, the complexity is already there from the beginning. And that complexity really requires us to overcome our stereotypes, our suspicions, and our internalized negative beliefs about other people. So intercultural relationships are challenging because from the get-go, you can't assume some of the things you would with somebody from your own culture.
Please.
I want to be very, very clear about some distinctions that are important to make. And this is something that when I teach my students, I have taught a class called Diversity in Counseling. And when I teach that, I talk about, we need to understand what I call the ladder of racism. So at one level, we all have preferences, right? I like brown skin. I don't like a certain other skin color. I like a certain kind of food, a smell. I like to wear a certain kind of dress. Those personal preferences are not a problem. And it's okay if I'm in a relationship with somebody, a friendship or an intimate relationship, where they're different from me, if we have different preferences, right? In my own marriage, I cook eggplant because Indians love eggplant and okra, and my husband doesn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. You know, he grew up here, he finds it slimy, he doesn't like the taste of it. So that preference is perfectly fine. And we have to learn to navigate that, right? I need to be sensitive to what he likes and doesn't like, and he needs to be sensitive. Certainly what he has to do is figure out how to let me know he doesn't like okra without making me feel like I'm a terrible person for liking it, right? The second level, the second step is prejudice. Prejudice is I have an individual preference and I think that okra is terrible, and I'm going to make you feel bad about it, right? Or I'm going to say, you Indians, you eat okra and you have no idea how disgusting that is. All of a sudden, I've gone from preference to prejudice, right? Now I'm creating injury in the relationship. The next level up is prejudice plus opportunity. This is more likely to happen in workplace relationships, in friendships, where I treat people differently based on my prejudice, on my personal preference, right? I create cliques, in groups, out groups. So high school, college, these are all places where people of a certain ethnic background or religion find themselves marginalized because now there's prejudice plus opportunity. And that causes a little more of a systemic, long-lasting impact on the person from the non-majority culture. Then we have prejudice plus power. Now we have the ability to discriminate and actually hurt people in their careers, in their lives. We say horrible things or we don't give them a job. What we're creating is a kind of dominant, submissive relationship. Power over, power under kind of relationship. The last is prejudice plus power plus hate. And that is where we get to the hate crimes, right? And so we've got to teach people how to be okay with their preferences, how to actually be proud of their preferences, and how not to move into prejudice, and then not to move into prejudice plus power. Right?
Wow, that makes makes a ton of sense, because I think sometimes we go from zero recognition to hate, and there is no in between. But you've just walked us through those differences and being able to see it, which actually takes us to our second round that we want to ask you, and Sharon's going to ask you the next question.
Yes, Dr. Meunier, how do we celebrate our diversity?
Okay, wow, that's such a great question, because that's a drum that I beat all the time, right? I'm a big fan of not problematizing diversity. When we talk about race or culture, very often it's presented in the media and it's presented in relationships like it's a problem. You know, if I say to somebody, oh, you know, what do you think about dating somebody that's African American? Their first answer is going to be, I don't have a problem with it. Right?
Wow.
It's probably not good that I'm asking the question, what do you think? So what we have to do is learn how to ask questions that say, tell me about what's great about dating an African American, or tell me how your cultural differences have become a strength in your relationship. And so I think what we need to do, first of all, is learn how not to problematize diversity and learn how to see diversity as a source of strength. Like I said, nature really values diversity, but there's a lot of scientific research that shows that diverse families, intercultural families, bicultural, multicultural families, intercultural and multicultural relationships, work groups are all likely to be more resilient, more productive, and have more creativity and more strength, because they're able to see an issue or a problem from multiple angles. And if they can harness that diversity, they can actually be much more competitive and much more productive in every aspect of society. So when we celebrate diversity, we're really buying into this idea that multiculturalism is good for us and actually makes us grow and become our best selves.
I love that you brought in the corporate aspect of, or the work aspect of it as well, because this is, we started off talking about marriage and personal relationships and seeing those differences, but those personal relationships include our family, our work family, as we call them, people that we can spend 40, 50, sometimes 60 hours a week with, or even our neighbors. And so how do we, boy, this is such a good conversation. Thank you for joining us today. We so need this in the United States and elsewhere.
Yeah.
How do we step into appreciating that diversity in our neighborhoods, in our workplaces, at our schools? It seems like a big task, but how do you recommend that we go about having more conversations like this, or actually being able to appreciate that sense of diversity and acknowledge it?
So first, let me just talk about the challenges of intercultural relationships, because there's always multiple intersecting and contradicting kinds of influences in intercultural relationships. When we're working across cultures, we have to think at the macro level, the systemic level. People are influenced by the political climate that you said, that we're influenced by what's going on at a global level, more so than ever before, in a way that is much more shocking and personal than we would have known 30 years ago, 50 years ago. It would have taken a much longer time for those pieces of information. We also know information at multiple levels, right? We know the official story, and then we know the journalist story, and then we know the social media story, which is the story of people on the ground who are telling each other, right? Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, these are all ways in which the news of the world reaches us. So we are all influenced by that, and we bring that into our relationships. We bring it in the form of internalized sexism, racism, classism. We bring it in the form of one of my favorite professors, one of my favorite mentors actually, used to say, it's like file folders in your brain. So everybody has file folders, and whatever's going on in your world gets, the data that gets added into that file folder. But then we also bring it in at the level of micro or individual influences, because nobody comes into, as an adult, an intercultural relationship without a history of some kind. Even if that history is you were completely isolated and protected from ever interacting with another person, with a person from another culture, or you grew up in a mixed neighborhood or went to a mixed school, either one of those is going to create a personal history, a history of trauma, a history of disappointment, or betrayals, or if you're a person of color, a history of oppression and discrimination. And we can't create a healthy multicultural, intercultural relationship without taking into account both of those influences. For example, one of the things that I wrote in my slides, which you're going to see in a minute, is inherent contradiction in an intercultural relationship is, how can I have an intimate, safe, trusting, and committed relationship with someone from another culture or background if I have already internalized a stigma or prejudice about people different from me, right? And that is the challenge. And I think in order to address that challenge, we have to begin with trust, with building trust across the boundaries. And I really believe that we grow and change and create meaning at the borders of two realities. My reality meets up with your reality. We have a conversation about it. I walk away changed, grown, learning something from it, and hopefully you walk away having learned something from it. And now we're going to take that into our individual cultures and communities. So, trust. Do you want me to go right into the conversation about trust?
We do, but we wanted to go ahead, Sharon.
So how does gratitude affect our multicultural relationships?
And you're talking about trust with that. So how do those two go hand in hand? Do they complement each other?
That's right. They absolutely do. So in his book, The Science of Trust, John Gottman talks about social capital research, okay? There was a study done where they went all over America and asked people to rate how much they trust each other, how much they trust this person, that person. And then they computed a high trust and a low trust kind of metric. And they found that there are regions in the United States that have high trust and regions that have low trust. Well, it turns out when you have low trust, the deep South, I'm from Texas, you all are from Florida, both of our states tend to have low trust. When you have low trust, you have a greater discrepancy between people who are rich and poor. You have less participation in community. You have lower economic well-being. You have a lower sense of neighborhood. And then you also have lower physical and mental health in individuals on both ends of that spectrum in some ways, right? What that does is it creates a feeling of stress and it creates a feeling of suspiciousness. So we're walking around kind of scanning the environment for what is this person's agenda? How are they judging me? And because I'm assuming other people are judging me, I'm judging them. Guess what? If I'm walking around scanning for agenda and judgment, I'm not appreciating. I'm not appreciating myself. I'm not appreciating other people. I'm going to have a harder time with gratitude.
Yeah.
So it turns out when you build trust, what you also do is you begin to build appreciation. When you get to know people and trust them, you begin to like them and you begin to find things in them that you can admire. So trust and gratitude are intimately connected in this way.
That's fantastic. How do you, do you talk with companies as well? Do you talk about the work environment? How do you get them to implement this kind of thinking? You're talking about it, and the step one, being educated about it, just like the ladder of discrimination, that's huge. Step two, then how do we actually turn to the implementation of, like, for example, trust and gratitude?
Right. Let me talk again using the Gottman's research, because John and Julie Gottman have done over 40 years of research looking at relationships that thrive and flourish. And there is nobody else in the world that I have seen that has that kind of complex, comprehensive data on this, okay? And so trust, there are 3 pillars of trust. And I think at the individual or interpersonal level, if you're working with somebody or falling in love with someone and wanting to have an intimate relationship, all the way up to corporate environments, you need to understand what creates trust. Number 1, fairness. There has to be a sense of fairness. Fairness does not mean equality. Fairness means that what people are told they will get, what promises were made to them are honored, and they feel like they're being treated with respect and consideration, just like they see other people being treated. So unequal treatment, or not unequal, but discriminatory treatment between 2 employees creates a sense of unfairness, okay? That begins to reduce trust. The second is feeling like my partner, my boss, my friend has my back, that I can count on this person to advocate for me, to fight for me, to know me well enough that in a meeting they can say, oh, you know, Vagdevi is somebody who really cares about her work. And so you don't have to worry about her. If she's didn't deliver this product, there's a good reason why. So let me go talk to her. I'm going to trust that person much, much more if I know. And by the way, in work environments, if we think we can throw somebody under the bus and it won't come back to bite us, good luck. Because I see that happen all the time, where bosses or leadership teams get together and talk about employees in negative ways, and then they wonder why they don't have a trusting work environment. Okay, because when the employee feels like my middle manager and my top manager or my husband, my wife, my friend is going to have my back, they're going to, one of the things Gottman says is that when you have high trust, you permit action with incomplete information. Somebody can call you and say, don't ask me why, but can you please just drive over there and deliver this product? You'll say, okay. You're not going to ask questions. You're going to trust that person has a good reason why. It reduces the complexity of all transactions because you don't then ask questions that say, why do I have to drive over there? What is this product? Why are you making me do it? We don't have to constantly test the other person to see if they have our back, if they're really being fair. And it minimizes the transaction cost. So once I go drive over there, drop off the product or whatever, I am not resentful about it. And so I don't come back and engage in the relationship in a way that increases tension, right? I'm going to see the positive side of it. Oh, I got to ride out into the country and it was kind of fun. I got to take a couple hours off of work. So I'm going to see the positivity in that interaction, right? Mm-hmm. The third pillar of trust is that my partner will be moved by my distress or pain, will listen to my experience, accept my influence, and be willing to be changed by it. So this works in intimate relationships. In terms of, I just had a big fight with my brother. I call my partner and I say, I need to talk tonight. And my partner says, absolutely, baby. Let me just finish this thing. I'll be home in half an hour and then we'll talk about this. And then my partner gives me their full attention, allows me to talk, doesn't judge me. At the end of that, I'm going to feel like I'm in a safe, trusting relationship. And I'm going to appreciate my partner in a very special way, because that is a private, intimate moment when I felt like I could turn to this person, reach for them, and be rewarded for that reaching. And that's pretty powerful in relationships. Same thing is true in work relationships. If I give my boss feedback and my boss listens and hears about how frustrating and challenging something is, validates my experience, they don't have to agree with me. They don't have to do what I'm asking them to do. What I want is to feel heard and understood.
That's fantastic. And I think also, and thank you for talking a lot about workplaces, because we needed to address that, and also with marriages, but also communities. It's interesting because sometimes our spiritual communities are supposed to be the safest places that we go to, but that fear of difference can send a different vibe, and it can affect that too. So this is true for spiritual communities. This is true for neighborhoods. This is true for pretty much anywhere. I can't believe we're coming towards the end of this conversation, which has been fantastic. But I've got a final question before the actual final question. We like to do that. And that would be, if there were one or two things that you can suggest to people who are in situations where they want to understand and appreciate the diversity that they're in their environment, but they don't have a practice. And this being the Global Gratitude Summit, we're really looking for, we're trying to find solutions, tangible things that people can actually do and implement once a day, twice a day, whatever that looks like, to help shift them towards being able to have that appreciation, and build towards the trust with that understanding. What might be one or two things that somebody could do, an action?
Practice. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say the most important daily practice that positivity research tells us is to practice gratitude. Our brains are wired for the negative. They're wired for survival. They're wired to remember things that are dangerous and threatening. So we actually have to teach our brains. We have to program our brains to think about and remember positive things. Otherwise, they automatically slide into, let me remember all the things that didn't go well. And so the best way to do that is to practice 2 or 3 times a day, just stopping and thinking about what's going on around you right now and having a moment of appreciation. The Dalai Lama says, I wake up every morning and I am so grateful I'm alive. And we don't often think about that. We don't often think about, oh, I can breathe and I have a house and I can eat and I can drive a car. And for the majority of the people who are going to be listening to this gratitude summit, those things are true, right? So
Yeah.
to start 3 times a day and say, no matter what, wow, I'm grateful that I have my children, my health, my work, my community, my spiritual faith. We can find something every day. So that's the first. The second, I think, most important principle is learn to accept influence. We are stronger and more powerful, and we build more trust and more positive intercultural relationships when we're willing to be changed by somebody else's story as much as we would like to change them. And so accepting influence creates communities of trust.
I've not heard it put that way. I really like that. Accepting influence, accepting how someone else sees the world, accepting that as an influence on me instead of putting that block up to say that's not how I think, I don't want to see it, or I don't want to hear it or experience it. I like that. That's and that allows you to see the individual. Huh.
It's the antidote to creating a world of good and bad, happy, unhappy, up, down, right, wrong. When you accept influence, you're saying there is no good and bad. There is no right and wrong. You see it your way, I see it my way. My way rubs off on you a little bit, and your way rubs off on me a little bit. We don't have to adopt each other's ways. We don't have to become like the other person. We have to be willing to simply be, influenced by it, to be awakened by it, to be somehow, changed by it, even a little tiny bit.
Wow, that's powerful. Wow. Well, thank you so much. Yes, okay, so Sharon has our.
Well, so how would you summarize your personal definition of gratitude?
Wow. Okay, you didn't tell me you were going to ask me that.
No, we saved that one as a secret.
We're trusting the process.
My personal definition of gratitude is that I find within me the divine spark that allows me to embrace life as it is, without judgment and without fear, knowing that I am put here for a purpose, and that if I can continue to be open to growth and new experiences, that I will discover what that purpose is, and that I will be able to have fulfilling experiences. I also believe that gratitude is about recognizing that I have all of the ingredients I need to be happy and satisfied right now in this moment already. There is nothing that I have to do or get in order to become happy.
Wow. Well done.
No kidding. That was like, I'm going to go back and I'm going to write that down. That needs to be on a plaque in my office. That was gorgeous. Yeah, really beautiful. And I want to say, it's interesting because your definition definitely fits what you do. You're open to receiving information and learning about other people, and then translating that with your purpose of teaching that as well. And, Dr. Meunier, we're honored that you're on the summit, but we're also just very honored and awestruck in all of our experts, but for you, for what you're doing in helping change the world and helping people understand differences and diversity and the value in it. And thank you for committing to that. Thank you for being willing to step into that area, because that's not an easy thing right now, but it's a very much needed thing right now. And, wow, just really very impressed with that. And thank you for the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. She said so much what I was thinking, that just all that you're doing, and you really are changing the world, and in areas that need to be changed. And the way you talk it, teach it, Thank you.
Your students are lucky.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Luann and Sharon, for this opportunity. It's really been my pleasure and honor to be asked to talk about multicultural relationships and gratitude. It's been a very fun conversation. I could go for hours, but thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, I want to remind our attendees that we will have the slides available so that you can follow along. I would encourage you to, you've already got them, print them out, refer back to them so that you can follow as Dr. Meunier is talking about them. Also, you can connect with her on her website, thecenterforrelationships.com. We will have that in the credits for this talk as well. So again, thank you, Dr. Meunier, and we will see all of the attendees again in our next episode. Have a great day, everybody.